This is the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
I would just like to dwell for a moment on tweaking the way we talk about these issues. Keep in mind, there is no such distinction between Catholic and Christian. Oh, you're a Catholic, I'm a Christian. Or we're Catholic, but those people are Christian. No, please eliminate that way of thinking and speaking from your vocabulary, because Jesus established Christianity, if you want to talk about it that way, in the form of his church, the Catholic Church, capital C. And the Catholic Church of today is the one and same Catholic Church that Christ established 2,000 years ago. When people today talk about they're Christian, what they really mean is they're Protestant. And here's what I mean by that. Yes, they're Christian, sure. If you believe in Jesus and you have been baptized, the Catholic Church recognizes that you are a Christian if you've been validly baptized. But this is Christianity as kind of this idea of this loose confederation of more or less like-minded people who believe in Jesus and they read the Bible and they kind of sort of agree on what the Bible teaches, but not really. This is why there are denominations within the phenomenon of Protestantism. So Lutheranism, you're up first, Luther, go. And then Calvinism and the Anabaptist movement. Then all the hundreds and maybe even thousands, who knows how many of them there are, of all the groups and subgroups and breakaway groups and breakaway groups. 500 years down the road, what people sort of nonchalantly refer to as Christianity or to be a Christian, all that really means is Protestant. And sure, there are groups that say, we're not Protestant, we're just Christian. But we believe in the Bible alone, or we believe in once saved, always saved, or we believe in justification by faith alone. All of these are heresies. All of these things are heresies that arose at the time of the Protestant rebellion, the Protestant Reformation, as is typically known. These unbiblical teachings, these traditions of men, like Sola Scriptura, for example, the Bible alone, that is nowhere in the Bible. Jesus didn't practice Sola Scriptura. The apostles didn't practice Sola Scriptura. The early church did not practice Sola Scriptura. It was when people like Martin Luther and John Calvin and the others in the 15th century began to systematize this notion. They began to thematize this notion that we will just go by the Bible alone, and what we read in the Bible, that's what we're going to do. So the next question is, well, how come that's what you're doing in your church, but the church across the street, they interpret the Bible in a different way than you do? Which of you is right? Well, we go by the Bible alone. Well, so do they. And you don't believe that you can lose your salvation. In that church across the street, the Lutheran church, they do believe you can lose your salvation. Or that church across the street, the Lutheran church, teaches that baptism regenerates the soul, which, by the way, it does, and that's true. But the Baptist church down the street says absolutely not. Baptism is just an ordinance. It's just a symbol. It doesn't do anything to you. It's like a wedding ring. It's a sign of something that's already happened, but it doesn't do anything to you. And then the Presbyterian church further down the street says, well, yeah, baptism actually does do something to you, but not in the way that the Lutherans say. And it's not merely an empty ordinance the way the Baptists would say. And then if you go across town to the Church of Christ, they say, well, baptism does regenerate you, but the only baptism that's valid is one that we ourselves perform in the Church of Christ. Now, there are a variety of different churches of Christ, not all of whom believe that, but a significant sector of them do believe that. And so my point here is that you've got all these various folk reading the Bible alone, claiming to go by the Bible alone, and they can't agree among each other as to what the Bible actually means. Technically, yes, they're Christians. They are, for the reasons I mentioned, but that's not what Jesus established, where the Bible becomes a Rubik's Cube. And it's effectively every man for himself. You decide what you think it means. Or through force of personality, you align yourself with a pastor of a church who has a forceful personality, and he thunders from the pulpit, and he says, this is what the Bible means. In essence, you've found a pope for the church that you go to. That is not historic Christianity. That is not what Jesus Christ established. And so the reason I'm passionate about this is because the way we use words directly affects what we believe. So I'm not, please don't misunderstand, I'm not punishing or, trying to be castigating anybody here, but trust me on this. Think about what you're saying and talk about Catholics and Protestants. Now, there are other, Eastern Orthodox folk, and there are other people further afield, but if you're talking about churches, whether they call themselves non-denominational or not, whether they have a denominational name or not, like Baptist or Presbyterian or Lutheran or Methodist, what have you, what you're dealing with there is the phenomenon of Protestantism, which is a protest movement against the Catholic Church. That's a trend right now. Instead of, Thomas Road Baptist Church or First Baptist Church or Second Baptist Church, now it's like Church on the Rock or the Summit Church, or they have these, Elevate Church, or they have these very intriguing names. They are intriguing. And you go there, and I don't belong to any denomination. I'm just going to the Church on the Rock. But it's actually a Baptist church. It's part of the Southern Baptist Convention very often. Not always, but very often. So my point is simply this. Catholics, please drop this habit of referring to yourself as a Catholic and a Protestant as a Christian. Yes, he's a Christian, but you have to understand you are in the church that is the original Christianity, the original Christian church. So when you open the Bible and you read the book of Acts, you're seeing the Catholic Church in her infancy. The people who wrote St. Luke in particular, and what he wrote about, St. Paul and the other apostles and their miracles and everything, that's the Catholic Church in its infancy. And by the end of that century, beginning of the second century, you have people like St. Ignatius of Antioch, who was martyred in the year 107. He's already calling it the Catholic Church. In the letters that he's writing to significant churches on his way to Rome to be martyred, he's writing epistles to them. He wasn't an apostle, but guess what? He learned the gospel from the apostle John. And he was an old man, Ignatius of Antioch, when he went to his eternal reward. He was devoured by lions in the amphitheater. That's how he was martyred. He learned the gospel from one of the apostles. And he himself is referring to the church as the Catholic Church, in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, etc. So that's it. And I'm sorry if it's a bit of a hobby horse, but this tendency to say Catholic and Christian and not really understand the reality behind it does more harm than good, if you ask me. That's all. This entire episode of the Patrick Madrid Show is on the Relevant Radio app. The Relevant Radio app is completely free and updated daily with fresh articles, podcasts, and prayers. Don't delay. Download the app today. And thanks for listening.